So thank you all for listening to me. It has become something of an annual Davos tradition for me to give an overview of the current state of the world. I was planning half an hour for my remarks and another half hour for questions, but my speech has turned out to be closer to an hour. I attribute it to the severity of the problems confronting us today. After I finished, I'll open it up for your questions, so please be prepared. I find the current moment in history rather painful. Open societies are in crisis, and various forms of dictatorships and mafia states, exemplified by Putin's Russia, are on the rise. In the United States, President Trump would like to establish a mafia state, but can't, because the Constitution, the institutions, and a vibrant civil society won't allow it. Whether we like it or not, my foundations, most of our grantees, and myself personally are fighting an uphill battle, protecting the democratic achievements of the past. My foundations used to focus on the so-called developing world, but now that the open society is also endangered in the United States and Europe, we are spending more than half our budget closer to home, because what is happening here is having a negative impact on the whole world. By protecting the democratic achievements of the past is not enough. We must also safeguard the values of open society so that they will be better able to withstand future onslaughts. Open society will always have its enemies, and each generation has to reaffirm its commitment to open society for it to survive. The best defense is a principled counterattack. The enemies of open society feel victorious, and this induces them to push their repressive efforts too far. And this generates a resentment and offers opportunities to push back. That's what's happening in places like Hungary today. I used to define the goals of my foundations as defending open societies from their enemies, making governments accountable, and fostering a critical mode of thinking. But the situation has deteriorated. Not only the survival of open society, but the survival of our entire civilization is at stake. The rise of leaders such as Kim Jong-un in North Korea and Donald Trump in the United States have much to do with this. Both seem to be willing to risk a nuclear war in order to keep themselves in power. But the root cause goes even deeper. Mankind's ability to harness the forces of nature, both for constructive and destructive purposes, continues to grow. while our ability to govern ourselves properly fluctuates and is now at a low ebb. The threat of nuclear war is so horrendous that we are inclined to ignore it. But it's real. Indeed, the United States is set on a course towards nuclear war by refusing to accept that North Korea has become a nuclear power. This creates a strong incentive for North Korea to develop its nuclear capacity with all possible speed, which in turn may induce the United States to use its nuclear superiority preemptively, in effect, to start a nuclear war in order to prevent a nuclear war, an obviously self-contradictory strategy. The fact is, North Korea has become a nuclear power, and there is no military action that can prevent what has already happened. The only sensible strategy is to accept reality, however unpleasant it is, and to come to terms with North Korea as a nuclear power. This requires the United States to cooperate with all the interested parties, China foremost among them. Beijing holds most of the levers of power against North Korea, but is reluctant to use them. If it came down too hard on Pyongyang, the regime could collapse and China would be flooded by North Korean refugees. What's more, Beijing is reluctant to do any favors for the United States, South Korea, or Japan, against each of which it harbors a variety of grudges. Achieving cooperation will require extensive negotiations, but once it's attained, the alliance would be able to confront North Korea with both carrots and sticks. The sticks could be used to force it to enter negotiations, and the carrots to reward it for verifiably suspending further development of nuclear weapons. The sooner a so-called freeze-for-freeze agreement can be reached, the more successful the policy will be. Success can be measured by the amount of time it would take North Korea to make its nuclear arsenal fully operational. I'd like to draw your attention to two seminal reports just published by Crisis Group on the prospects of a nuclear war in North Korea. The other major threat to the survival of our civilization is climate change, which is also a growing cause of forced migration. I have dealt with the problems of migration at great lengths elsewhere, but I must emphasize how severe and intractable those problems are. I don't want to go into details on climate change either, because we know what needs to be done. We have the scientific knowledge. It's the political will that is missing particularly in the Trump administration. Clearly, I consider the Trump administration a danger to the world, but I regard it as a purely temporary phenomenon that will disappear in 2020 or even sooner. I give President Trump credit for motivating his core supporters brilliantly, but for every core supporter, he has created a greater number of core opponents who are equally strongly motivated. That's why I expect a Democratic landslide in 2018. My personal goal in the United States is to help re-establish a functioning two-party system. This will require not only a landslide in 2018, but also a Democratic Party that will aim at a non-partisan redistricting, the appointment of well-qualified judges, a properly conducted census, and other measures that a functioning two-party system requires. I want to spend the bulk of my remaining time on another global problem, the rise and monopolistic behavior of the giant IT platform companies. These companies have often played an innovative and liberating role, but as Facebook and Google have grown into ever more powerful monopolies, they have become obstacles to innovation, and they have caused a variety of problems of which we are only now beginning to become aware. Companies earn their profits by exploiting their environment. Mining and oil companies exploit the physical environment. So social media companies exploit the social environment. This is particularly nefarious because social media companies influence how people think and behave without them even being aware of it. This has far-reaching adverse consequences on the functioning of democracy, particularly on the integrity of elections. The distinguishing feature of internet platforms is that they are networks and they enjoy rising or marginal returns, and that accounts for the phenomenal growth. The network effect is truly unprecedented and transformative, but it's also unsustainable. It took Facebook 8.5 years to reach the first billion users, and half that time to reach the second billion. At this rate, Facebook will run out of people to convert in less than 3 years. Facebook and Google effectively control over half of all internet advertising revenue. To maintain their dominance, they must expand their networks and increase their share of the user's attention. Currently, they do this by providing users with a convenient platform. The more time users spend on the platform, the more valuable they become to the companies. Content providers also contribute to the profitability of social media companies because they can't avoid using the platform.